Everybody, and welcome to episode 7 of Silver Screen Anomalies.
Our not so spooky month episode.
It's true. I'm Hallie.
And I'm Skyler.
And we've got quite the lineup for you today.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting episode. And I mean, there's one way you could look at this where you could totally see a bit of a horror angle out of these two films, because they're certainly not the easiest to watch.
No. And I mean, there's costumes.
There's clowns.
And there's clowns.
And no one likes clowns at
Didn't
Halloween.
we already do this?
Oh yeah, I'm starting to see into infinity here. What is this, the year of clowns for us?
I guess so.
Yeah, wow.
There it is, 2019, Year of the Clown.
Year of the Clown.
First up on our agenda today is...
the infamous and recently released Joker.
Joker.
So Joker is a 2019 film directed by Todd Phillips. Arthur Fleck, a clown for hire, is a man struggling in the troubled city of New York. Gotham?
Yeah.
Caught in a vortex of depression and cruelty, Arthur resorts to making one poor decision after another, all culminating in a whirlwind of violence, in this gritty character study of a broken man and a broken society. Oh, and it's also a Batman villain origin story.
Just saying.
Just for funsies.
Just for funsies.
Because literally there are points in this movie where you forget you're watching anything that's even remotely related to a comic book movie.
It's really heavy.
It's dark and upsetting. And
yeah, I hope nobody went into this thinking it would be like a fun comic book movie for their kids.
I left and I was like, cool, I'm going to go take a nap.
I was like, yeah, I need some ice cream.
It's like, well, that was upsetting.
It's my happy food, ice cream. I mean, right off the bat, you've got Arthur struggling to smile at a job where he's paid to smile.
It's a great shot in the trailer, and it's a great sequence in the movie. It's such a good way to open this thing. And in case you haven't tuned into our podcast ever before,
we're not spoiler free.
We're going to spoil the shit out of this movie.
We are going to spoil the shit out of it. So, straight out of the gate, he is putting on his makeup, getting ready for work. He goes outside to do his job and gets his sign stolen. His
sign, which very much is an embodiment of the theme of the movie. Everything must go.
Everything must go.
It is so thematic.
As quickly and violently as possible.
Yeah, good Lord. More on that later.
Yeah. So, he goes out, he gets... his sign stolen. He chases down the kids to get his sign back and gets the shit kicked out of him.
And this is the first of many violent and upsetting sequences of cruelty, acts of cruelty that are against Arthur and his uphill struggle with life. This is very much a story of a very sick, mentally ill man who is suffering in society and just wants to make his big break and just can't.
Yeah.
Can't seem to get ahead.
No.
Life is kicking him down over and over and over again. And I mean, are you feeling good yet?
No.
Audience? Yeah. This is not the feel-good movie of the year.
My ice cream.
Yeah. Following that sequence leads to a psych appointment. He's going for a psych eval and very much is just pleading to his psychiatrist that all he has are negative thoughts.
And he in need of an increase on his medication, something to help him smile.
That's right. It's very much the message of the movie. This is about the Joker finding his smile, and what leads to that is a series of dark events, which is first revealed in this sequence where he's going into his psych appointment. His notebook is just riddled with horribly violent passages, writings, drawings. It's also the first glimpse into the Joker that we inevitably see come the end of this film, because this is a transformation film. This is not an underdog story about a man who's broken and then works his way to the top. No, it's not that at all. It is a man turning into a monster. For all intents and purposes, the monster that we know, the villain in the comic book lore, and that's very much the way this movie wants you to view it.
Yeah, and kudos to them. I've read a lot of Batman comics. I have watched a lot of movies. I have played a lot of games, lots of cartoons growing up as a kid. Every day I'd be watching Batman the Animated Series. It's great. And there's no solid backstory for the Joker.
No, he prefers his origin story to be multiple choice, as quoted from The Killing Joke.
Yeah.
He's very much a unreliable narrator and a complete fabricator of his own stories. We even got sprinkles of that, obviously, in the Christopher Nolan films. Rest in peace, Heath Ledger, of course.
Yeah, I think
you will be missed.
I think arguably both of our favorite Joker.
Yeah, I still think Heath is my favorite, although it goes without saying Joaquin Phoenix is amazing in this movie.
A fantastic job. Like, whew, damn. But, you know, we'll talk a little more about unreliable narrator towards the end of this segment because we got some stuff to say.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a twist in this movie.
Yeah.
Several twists, really, depending on how you watch this and
Yeah.
depending if you're Hallie or not, and all the twists get ruined for you right
It's true,
away.
there weren't many twists for me in this
Hallie's
one.
a writer, so, you know.
It's hard. You can't con a con man.
That's right.
Anyway, so as he's going home into his decrepit apartment building, he gets into an elevator and there's a girl or a young woman there with a small child. And, you know, they seem to have this little connection between them in the elevator ride up.
Fleeting and brief, yeah.
Fleeting and brief. And then we get introduced to Arthur's mother.
Who's more involved in the plot of this movie than I actually expected, because she actually ties very much into the film's sort of core fabric of what really is at the heart of Arthur's delusions and issues as a character. Like, because we are studying him. Like, that's what the audience is doing. We're almost like voyeuristically watching this person unravel and transform into something else. And his mother is very much a catalyst for the violence and the upsetting breakdown of Arthur.
In so many ways.
Oh, goodness, yes.
But, you know, at this point, they just enjoy watching Murray on TV. It's a talk show. And this is the first glimpse we have into the fantasy that Arthur has woven for himself.
Yes, and
he fantasizes being on this TV show with Murray and saying what a good son he is and how he just wants to make people smile. And Murray's so taken with him and he brings him up on stage and, you know, oh, I wish my son was like you.
Yeah, there's an entire like daydream fantasy sequence that plays out directly out of Arthur's head. And of course, the talk show host is very appropriately played by Robert De Niro.
Which we'll get to later.
Yeah, it's actually very clever.
Very clever.
This movie wears its Martin Scorsese DNA all over it. It's Taxi Driver, of course. It's very much the king of comedy. But
king of comedy, what's that?
I don't know what that is.
I don't know what that is.
We'll
Anyway.
see. All right, cool.
Anyway, the story progresses and misfortune yet again falls upon Arthur, as is the way of this particular story.
Well, he acquires a gun, so
which
that's
is
cool.
kind of a
it's a big deal.
But just here, you need this to stop hoodlums from taking your sign.
And this is at the point in the movie where I was like, okay, that felt
wait a minute.
That felt too easy.
Yeah.
More on that later.
You're not going to question this further. You're just going to take the gun and run with it. Okay,
goodness. Yeah.
all right.
So
cool.
There's a sequence in this movie where he is committing to a job at a children's hospital and doing this amazing sort of dance sequence. Their dancing is very much also in the DNA of this movie. There's so much dancing and music. Music is such a big part of Arthur's life.
Yeah.
You can tell. So he very much embodies dance with positive feelings. You can tell. Like, that's his attempt at feeling good about himself.
The Joker's always danced.
And the Joker's always dancing. So it's him trying to reflect positivity on the situation and take over the scene. He's so much in like center frame in this movie.
And he is so overjoyed with his dancing that for some reason, he had it on him, and the gun falls out of his pant leg.
He just drops this gun on the floor, and then
in
all
a
the
children's
kids
hospital.
and the kids rightfully freak the fuck out.
Oh my god! So, needless to say, he gets fired.
Well, yeah, as you would, and I mean, the whole audience was squirming. By the way, during this sequence, it was kind of great.
Yeah, I kind of hid my face.
So it's been established that Arthur has a gun, and this is where the inciting incident takes place, where Arthur inevitably winds up fighting back. He uses the weapon effectively.
Yeah, you got a trio of rich suits harassing a young woman on a train. She walks away, and
it leads to one of the most uncomfortable sequences of laughter I've seen in a film. Oh my goodness, I can't even think of one, really. Like, it's really upsetting because Arthur's laugh is very much a stigma or a byproduct of his mental illness. It's diagnosed. Like, he basically is internally screaming when he is laughing. It's a dry, deep, guttural laugh that brings him pain more than anything else. It's not a pleasurable experience for him. So he's just gut laughing on this train, and then the men, the suits that were harassing the woman, suddenly draw their attentions to Arthur and subsequently beat him up, and then he reacts in a very violent fashion with the gun. And this
it goes bang bang,
bang bang, and this is the inciting incident and very much the trigger point, no pun intended, of the entire film. It winds up being the catalyst for these clown riots that take place in Gotham, and what inevitably leads to one of my favorite sequences in the movie, which is Arthur just hysterically running away from the train in those big shoes, and just the way it's shot is so frantic, and then it quiets down. He goes into a bathroom stall, this dirty, grimy Gotham City bathroom, and the way it's lit is beautiful, and he just starts dancing. It's a triumphant dance, though.
Yeah.
It's the first time we see the Joker in the movie for what he really is.
Yeah.
It's the first time he has taken control back. He feels dominant. He feels at home with his decisions. And that's at the point where the movie is very much, okay, cool. So if you were sympathizing with this guy, you're not anymore at all. Like, he's...
Brace yourselves.
Yeah, he's upsetting, and he's broken, and now he's unleashed.
Yeah. And so...
So we had to take a minor cat break.
Yes. Once again, Peanut Butter has joined us on the podcast.
He was screaming and running around cross-eyed and knocking things on the floor.
As is his way.
I had to escort him out of the building.
Yes.
Thank you for being patient with us.
So, yeah. So he kills the three guys and has this triumphant dance in the bathroom. And then... he goes home, and of course his mother's been writing Thomas Wayne to help them because they live in squalor, and she used to work for Thomas Wayne years and years ago. And he's a good man. She insists he's a good man, and he's going to help them. If he saw how they were living, he'd be disgusted. So she goes to bed, and he ends up reading one of the letters and discovering that Thomas Wayne is his father. Which is an interesting little twist.
It's an interesting twist, and it's at this point, like, I'm scratching my head because there's so many things going on and so many moving pieces in this movie that are off kilter with canonically what we know of Batman and Batman lore. Namely, like, the depiction of Thomas Wayne is very much a different one than what we were expecting, because Thomas Wayne is often a beacon of light. He's
a philanthropist.
Yes, but he's also supposed to be a supporter of fixing the poverty issue.
But in this, he's running for mayor.
He's a lot older. There's age differences in all the characters that are not totally on point with what we're used to. And Thomas Wayne is also just kind of like a belligerent, rich asshole.
Yeah, he doesn't come across very kind.
Those clown riots that I was speaking of very much are a poor versus the rich sort of aesthetic. So they have signs that are very much, there's a lot of political allegory here that's focusing on, like, oh, Thomas Wayne's a fascist, and I mean, it's, oh, I wonder what they're talking about there.
Classism and
this movie's more about classism than anything else, really.
Yeah, which actually, looking back on the comics and basically Gotham's origins and its history, that's pretty on the spot.
Well, yeah, and I mean, it's the mark of poverty and the lack of support, and with mental health especially, that leads very much to Arthur's just slow decline into madness.
Yeah, and I mean, Arthur's psychologist, the funding for that service gets cut. And he no longer has that support, right? So anyway, they finds out that Thomas Wayne was his father, and then through the jigs and the reels, finds out that no, he wasn't. In fact, his mother was delusional and obsessed with Thomas Wayne, and adopted a son, and moved in with a boyfriend who beat his son senseless constantly, you know? But she was delusional, insisting that he was the love child of Thomas Wayne and her, which, again, feeds into the delusion aspect of this that we're building up to
Well,
here.
this whole movie is just drenched in delusion. The whole thing it feels like a fever dream. It's so...
It does.
For how well shot it is and how beautiful and striking the images are in this movie, it's interesting that the editing is very specific. It's so very much feels like almost like a nightmare. You're kind of like not connected entirely to the narrative, because the narrative starts off purposefully very straightforward, and then it slowly starts, things just keep happening that will confuse you.
Yeah.
You start to feel really disconnected.
Yeah. And I think that's something we're building up to here, we're going to get to in a minute.
Yeah.
Because
that's the point.
Yeah. His mother's not the only one that's delusional, though. It's revealed, that Sophie, the girl that he's been gradually having this relationship with, she shows up at the comedy club he's performing at, seems very supportive. His mother has a stroke. She's in the hospital with him. But it turns out, after he finds out that his mother was delusional, he goes into Sophie's apartment and sits down on the couch, and she comes out from tucking her daughter in, and she's terrified. She said, "You're Arthur, you live down the hall, don't you?" And at that point you discover he was imagining the whole thing. Every time she was there, it was just a delusion.
Yeah, which again is kind of like, for you, that wasn't so much a twist.
No, that wasn't a surprise for me. But
yeah, and it's a thing where that was very much kind of like the axe dropping for me, where it's like, okay, cool. So there's a rewatch in my future here where I would like to go through and really with a fine comb and pick apart this movie, because there's a lot going on here that doesn't add up or doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And the girlfriend reveal, with her being very much a fantasized girlfriend, winds up leading to some of the more disturbing sequences in the movie, because that comedy club scene that you mentioned is another inciting incident that leads to very much the climax of the movie, where inevitably we see the full transformation of our character.
Which unfortunately they spoiled in the trailer.
Yeah.
I wish they'd stop doing that. That would have been a great reveal, just to be organic and fresh.
But like, what's wonderful about the sequence is that it's very much suggested throughout the movie with a number of just gestural actions from this just completely insane and amazing performance by Joaquin Phoenix. He suggests that he's going to commit suicide on live television, and turns the gun on to Robert De Niro and blows his head off. And
on live TV.
On live TV, which is very much a Joker thing.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
And then he talks directly to the audience and the camera and is just hauled off into a police car. And then what leads to one of the most like disturbing and gorgeous sequences of just like an eruption of violence and fire.
Yeah.
It's fire and brimstone in Gotham.
Which isn't the first time it's happened in Gotham.
No, not at all.
That seems to be a regular Saturday.
It's a regular setting. It's kind of part of the tourism, I imagine.
Really? That sequence of chaos erupting in the street really reminded me of, again, The Dark Knight. And one of my favorite sequences where the Joker is not being hauled away in a police car, but being freed in a police car.
Yeah.
And there have been articles online that have gone, oh, is this an homage, this sequence, him in the police car and Heath Ledger's Joker in the police car? But I don't think that...
I don't know about that.
I don't think that was quite...
It kind of has its own DNA and it feels very different. And it leads to very much the point in the movie where I almost like, in an offhand way, sort of, it was almost like a clap-worthy moment where I was like, bravo, you got us. Because the eruption of violence leads to a reveal of Thomas and Martha Wayne. They're leaving the theater, and now, if you're a Batman fan, you know very well the Mark of Zorro has a very distinctive, I guess, insignia on Batman canonical lore, where we're dealing with the death of Thomas and Martha Wayne. They leave the theater and they're leaving Zorro and the Gay Blade. This is where the DNA of the movie unravels unto itself. This is where it spoke to me about what its true intentions are, and this entire movie is basically spoken word through an unreliable narrator, which is such a Joker thing to do. So they leave the theater, and it's the clown riots that caused the death of Thomas and Martha Wayne, and which leads to a chilling, almost Psycho sort of worthy, like Alfred Hitchcockian ending of, we get our first genuine laugh from Arthur Fleck in the mental hospital.
Yeah, so at the
Arkham
very
Asylum.
end, once he's been apprehended and he's in the mental asylum with his psychiatrists, and he does this laugh.
And it's the first genuine laugh, and he's laughing at a joke that he refuses to reveal the punchline to, and it is the death of Thomas and Martha Wayne being the creation of Batman. And then it leads to one of the most Joker moments in the whole movie, where he leaves the cell just with his drenched in blood and runs down the hall and is being just chased through the hospital.
Yeah.
It's brilliant, and it's disturbing and upsetting. It's not going to make you feel great, but it is undeniably a true depiction of this character.
And here's why.
Yes. So have you been keeping up with our little, like, there's a reason why we decided to break down the entire plot, because this is a hard movie to pin down.
It is a hard movie to pin down. But as I say, here's why. It's what Skyler said earlier, is the Joker has always been an unreliable narrator. He has more background stories delivered by himself than I can recall off the top of my head. He prefers multiple choice.
That's right. So throughout the entire movie, the editing is very much orchestrated in a way to give you this sort of false sense of narrative. It's very much a disconnect. So there will be a sequence where Arthur will be interacting with Thomas Wayne, and then it'll be intercut with him in his apartment, and then he'll put himself into a refrigerator. Then the next cut is him waking up in his bed the next day. These three sequences don't go together.
Yeah.
And it's because he's telling the story from his perspective or a perspective.
Yeah. And there's a couple of things. It's like looking at an original piece of art and a forgery. The forgery could be really good, but if you know the origins, if you know the original well enough, you can mark those forgeries. It's like we said with Thomas and Martha Wayne. They're not depicted accurately. And I mean, to each their own. When you're depicting something like this, you have some artistic license there. But I don't think that they went with artistic license. I think they actually stayed really close to the character.
I think your analogy is super spot on, by the way. I think that's a great way to describe this, by using paintings as an analogy, because even like the theater sequence, him getting one small detail, like the Zorro film that they saw, it's a very Joker thing to, of course, mix it up with the spoof of a Zorro film with Zorro and the Gay Blade. It's very canonical with the character that he's almost putting his own little twist and spin on the story. It's like 60% truth and 40% fabrication. And it's that unraveling of madness that is just permeated all through the film, and you just feel it. It just escalates and escalates and escalates, and it's so well done. And his performance, he's like the centerpiece of this whole thing. There's not a single shot where Joaquin Phoenix isn't in it, and he's front and center. And you said it aptly yourself, like, he refers to himself as the clown prince of crime, and he is the centerpiece of his own story.
He's narcissistic.
Yeah,
he's the center of attention.
He thinks he's a king.
Yeah.
And the sequence with him dancing on the stairwell is definitive of that. Like, it's such an amazing sequence, and the music was like stuck in my head for a couple days afterwards.
They chose some great music.
I loved the score.
The score in this was really beautiful.
The whole thing was beautiful. It's the most ugly but gorgeous movie I've ever seen in my life, because it's not something that's going to sit with you well. It makes you feel ill when you leave.
And it should.
And it should. It's absolutely true to form. That's what this character is about. And it's a character study. Yeah. At the end of the day, that's what this is. You can look at it from whatever angle you want. There's a way to watch this and separate it from the comic book lore, but its intentions are very much grounded in a character. And the fact of the matter is that it's just such a work of like cinematography. Like it's so beautiful. Like I was shocked at a lot of the images in this. There was a lot of good use of color. The costuming and makeup was very specific, very well executed and thoughtful in design.
And just going back to the illusion aspect, where we have to question as the audience whether, knowing the Joker as we do, whether this whole narrative that we've sat through, whether it was real or whether it was just another part of his imagination, his delusion. Near the beginning of the film, when he's in his appointment with his psychiatrist, there is a brief, like a second clip of him in a straitjacket in a psych ward, smashing his head against glass. And at the time you see it, you're made to wonder, okay, well, that obviously he has background with Arkham, but it's never mentioned again throughout the whole. You don't know what for, you don't know for how long. Yeah, he's seeing a psychiatrist and getting medication, so it's possible. But at the end of the movie, when you go through all of this and you start wondering if this is actually a real narrative or not, was that past Arthur or was that now Arthur?
Yeah, it's very much my analysis on this. And after unpacking it for a week, my own personal fan theory, if we have to use such a term, I personally feel like the end of this movie is set in present day. And it's in the future where Arthur is the Joker.
Yeah.
And he's recalling his own origin story. And the depictions that we're seeing throughout the movie, the narrative, is actually in the past. And it's all very much a fabrication. There are sprinklings of truth in there, but for the most part, it is...
But you're never going to know what they are.
It's the ramblings of a madman,
yeah.
which is brilliant in one aspect and also a problem in another, which leads to kind of one of my criticisms of the movie. It's the message of the movie is a little lost on me. It doesn't really have a clear one, and it gets a little confused and muddled. Like, it's a fun movie to decipher and unpack if you're the kind of person that wants to go in and do such a thing, and I do feel like it can be studied in that regard. I think it's very well directed by Todd Phillips. It's easily his best movie, because I'm not a huge fan of those hangover movies. I
like the first one. It was kind of amusing.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan. This is a lot more sure-handedly directed, and it feels more professional. It feels more specific and clearly directed. And it has like a vision. There's a clear vision with this movie, but the messaging is lost.
Yeah, the message is lost. But I guess I approach this, as you said, as a character study.
Yeah,
being
totally
familiar with the Joker and the comics and the cartoons, etc. I wasn't looking for a message, I don't think.
Fair enough.
I wanted to see what this movie was about. I wanted to see how they handled this version of the Joker, and I wasn't disappointed. I thought that they did a really good job portraying the Joker, especially with, I am going with fan theory as well. We need like a soundbite for that. Fan theory. Where it's fake. Everything, it's just another possibility of how I got these scars,
one of
so
many,
to speak.
One of many potential outcomes.
Yeah. So
this is also very clearly inspired very heavily by a lot of other movies. Namely Scorsese. We mentioned this before. There's Taxi Driver and The King of Comedy DNA all over this thing.
and we'll talk about that later.
Yes, absolutely. I think Taxi Driver's got a little more of a stamp on this than anything else. And there's a lot of parallels there, which it was another thing that was a little distracting for me. It was hard for me to separate the Scorsese elements out of this, and this movie is still unique in its own way, and I do think it has its own set of DNA, but it was a little distracting for me to not compare it to those other films. So I guess with those criticisms of mine out of the way, it goes without saying that I do still really like this movie, but we should get the number.
Let's gauge on a numerical scale just how much we like this movie.
So I'm going to let you start.
Oh, yeah. I see how it is.
Yeah.
All right. Joker. I enjoyed it. There were no surprises for me here, I don't think. I thought Joaquin Phoenix did an amazing job, right up there with Heath Ledger. I give Joker a 9 out of 10.
Cool. That makes a lot of sense, and it's well deserved. It's a pretty exceptional film. Whether this is a movie I'm going to revisit or not remains to be seen. If I do revisit it, it won't be out of the pleasures and joys of watching this again, because it is not a pleasant experience.
Now, I would like to see it again, though. Now that I've had it the first time, I would like to go back and see it one more time to like see how much my theory stands on its legs.
I think if there's anything to unpack and go back and revisit, it's very much the narration of the movie and how you could go and unravel it as an unreliably sourced series of delusions by a comic book villain or a broken man, depending on how you want to watch it, which is interesting to say the least. But and I had a few other criticisms. Barring those, I still really enjoyed this movie. I thought it was excellent, actually. It's incredibly well scored, well shot and directed. I think there's a lot of really good intent here. It's far better than it ever should have been, because I'll be honest, my initial response to hearing that they were going to do a Joker origin story was not a positive one.
No, mine wasn't either.
Well, I don't know if that had anything to do with just the Jared Leto stink wafting in the air. Yeah, but needless to say, I really enjoyed this movie. I'm going with an 8.5 out of 10.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, there we go. That's our first round. Let's move on to the next movie.
Ding ding, round 2.
No, that's Remake Rumble.
Oh shit, I got our shows mixed up.
Our shows mixed up. All right. So there's a reason that we've been saying, like, we'll talk more about that Robert De Niro connection later and that Scorsese connection later.
Yeah, so the second movie that we want to cover in our session today is The King of Comedy, because we feel like Joker has been getting a lot of Taxi Driver comparisons, but there's also quite a lot of DNA that's being connected to The King of Comedy, and not enough people are really talking about that. So we thought it would be a fun sort of I guess, like, breakdown on the parallels between both movies. Obviously, we're going to review this movie separately on its own, but it's kind of hard to talk about this movie after you just spent, I don't know, half hour talking about Joker.
It's true. And there are some pretty distinct parallels. Aside from the fact that Robert De Niro is hosting a talk show in The Joker, and his whole goal is to be on a talk show in this movie.
I like to think that they're the same character.
And maybe that's part of the delusion.
That could
Who
be.
knows?
That's kind of fun, actually. So without any further ado, here's our breakdown. The King of Comedy, directed by Martin Scorsese. This Martin Scorsese directed satirical comedy, classic, explores the lengths one man will take to achieve his 15 minutes of fame. Rupert Pupkin believes his one appearance on the Jerry Langford Show will be the key to unlocking fame, success, and fortune in his life. His delusion, obsession, and genuine lack of self-awareness leads him down a dangerously cringeworthy path. Enjoy? ?
Oh, and there are, I like that. And there are so many cringeworthy moments. I think we were both like, wow, it's too bad we didn't have a camera set up watching us watch this.
Oh my God, that would almost be just as entertaining because we were watching this thing together and I think I was writhing more uncomfortably watching this movie than I was Joker.
Yeah, and you know what? There is very minimal to no violence in this movie.
There's suggested violence and that's it. There's no explicit violence.
No.
Just maybe like the threat of violence, but that's it. It winds up being a total ploy. It's all just complete delusion, cringeworthy levels of lack of self-awareness, all very much stemming from a very, very good performance by Robert De Niro. Like, he's really like unraveling in a way that I haven't seen him unravel in any other performance. Like, this is new for me. It's fresh. I've never seen this movie before. So it was really cool actually seeing a different side to his kind of like character acting. And this was kind of like in his prime too. So it was really kind of engaging and interesting to see him like really play this just completely delusional and just sad human being.
Yeah, and it is. It's a man who's completely lost in his own fantasy. He wants to be so much. He wants to be the man on the talk show. He wants to be in the limelight. He wants to be successful, rubbing elbows with Jerry, the talk show host. And it's so, oh God, it's so made me so uncomfortable.
Oh yeah, it doesn't stop. It's almost an unrelenting, almost unbearable watch. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying really hard to make it sound like this is a great movie because it is.
It is a very good movie.
It's extremely good. I mean, it's worth noting that when this movie was originally released in 1983, that it actually received very negative press and reviews. It was not heralded very fondly by critics. That being said, it's obviously gone on to be misunderstood. Mm-hmm. Very much a Blade Runner type scenario, I guess, or 2001 perhaps. But like it's obviously stood the test of time, and now it's dissected a lot in film schools and things, and rightfully so, because there's a really good, sure-handed way that Scorsese is directing specifically tension in this movie, because it builds and builds and builds, and you're just excessively becoming uncomfortable the entire movie.
Yeah.
And that's the joke. That's actually where the sort of uncomfortable comedic elements of this kind of come into play, where you're laughing out of discomfort. That's very much how I would describe this movie.
Oh yeah, and I think it's fair to say there was quite a bit of that when we were watching it. So you've got Robert De Niro's character, Rupert, who is so obsessed with being a talk show host that his basement is actually designed to look almost like a studio. He's got cardboard cutouts of celebrities in his basement.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's like a live set.
And he's recording, and this is a moment where Skyler got to witness firsthand. Hallie calls it.
Oh my God.
He's recording, and his mother is shouting downstairs about keeping the volume down on his recorder, and why is he playing music so late, and what is he doing down there, and he's yelling back at her to shut up, and he's gonna keep it down, etc., etc. And I looked over at Skyler and I went, she's dead.
And like my initial thoughts were, okay, cool, clever take on it, but I took it almost as like it's like a sitcom type scenario of like the disconnected voice. It's like Charlie Brown, like disconnected parent voice type thing. I was thinking it was like an artistic representation of his disconnect and broken family life, and him living with his mother was kind of an extra layer to that.
Yeah.
I was horribly wrong, and once again, Hallie's expertise with writing come into play.
Because when it is revealed that in fact she's been dead for 9 years,
which was, oh yeah, no, no, that was
Yeah.
very much a crowd pleasing moment for
I'm
Hallie.
a writer, and you can't con a
Yeah.
con man.
It was a high five moment for sure.
Yeah, it
You
was. It
You
was
win,
really
my
good.
friend.
I did.
Yeah, it was actually a lot of fun watching this, but I say fun in the loosest of terms. It was more just like, I feel like I would have a different experience if I was to watch this on my own.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I wouldn't have been, it's not that I wouldn't have been engaged, but it wouldn't have been nearly as fun.
No, I think that watching it together was pretty fun.
Yeah.
And I mean, speaking to the characters in this, De Niro's character isn't the only one that's delusional,
Oh my
let's say.
God.
This is definitely a movie about wanting success and fame and also obsession. Huge dose of obsession, because we've got another character in this that's named Masha, played by Sandra Bernhard. And for those of you who don't know who this is, I'd like to direct your attention to Brooklyn Nine-Nine and Gina Linetti's mother.
Yes.
That's who this is.
In more recent terms.
In more recent terms.
Yeah, she's been in quite a lot, actually. It's quite the pedigree.
Yeah, and she is real good in this.
Oh, yeah. No, and in a lot of cases, I found her to be more the comedic levity in the movie than anything else, because like De Niro is just going for this just sad, pathetic human. Like, he's so annoyingly confident in everything that he does in an insufferable manner. Like he assumes that he's best friends with like Jerry Langford, and he's constantly like just going on telephones and things like that and pretending he's speaking to him. It's like
the illusions of grandeur.
And like, I know people like that.
Oh yeah.
Like, it's so bizarre. That's part of the reason why I felt so uncomfortable, is that it's such a true to life depiction. And this is where kind of like some of the parallels to Joker sort of come in, because that level of instability in a human exists in real life, and the depiction is so accurate that it makes you unsettled. It makes you uncomfortable. And that's very much what Joker was too, where, I mean, obviously in the cases of Joker, it's on a very, very extreme scale, and a very different vibes, very broken, damaged individual there. But like, this is a bit different.
He doesn't kill anyone, it's true, in this movie, but he does end up kidnapping the talk show host and holding him at gunpoint unless they put him on the air.
That's right.
While he then goes off to go and have his on-air time and leaves Jerry, the talk show host, with Masha, the obsessed fan.
In one of the most like cringe-inducing but like extremely well lit and romanticized flirtatious scenes I've ever seen. It's so awkward and upsetting, and just I kind of loved it. I couldn't stop laughing.
See, I didn't know that this scene existed before. So I saw this scene initially on Family Guy with Meg and Brian, and I was like, oh my God, this is where it comes from. And of course, because, Seth MacFarlane constantly references pop culture.
I was going to say, what's that? You mean Family Guy is nothing but ripping off other things? Oh, yeah.
Oh, shots fired.
Yeah, well,
damn.
Yeah, it's nothing but a spoof there.
I mean, I'm not saying you're wrong, but
it's still a funny bit. I'll give you that.
Yeah. So, it turns out this whole time that the gun was a fake. It was fake. It fired matches or something?
Yeah, it was so ridiculous. I love the performance by Jerry as well. Oh my God.
By the time, so far, let's see, he has been stalked by a girl, this Masha character. He's stalked by Rupert.
Yeah.
And he's had Rupert and the poor Rita, who she's a bartender, used to be a cheerleader at Rupert's school. Rupert had a huge crush on her. She gets roped into this. So she's broken into the guy's house, essentially. And Jerry has been through so much that by the time he's taped, and I mean mummified to a chair,
he's
being approached by this she looks like a teenager.
Oh, he looked like he was gonna bound him and put him in a sarcophagus.
He just went like over a wet cat. He was just so done with everybody's shit by the time this happened.
Someone watched a little too much Red Green. That's for all. That's for our Canadian fans.
Which is a lot of duct tape.
Which is all of our fans.
Yeah.
But that being said, this movie is very much about obsession. It's about the lengths that people would go to for fame and fortune, or our obsession with celebrities, more specifically. It's a big dissection of that. I mean, the inciting incident in Joker is a descent into madness as a result of a shooting on a train. The inciting incident in this movie is in the first 10 minutes, and it's when Jerry just very, very passive aggressively just says, just call my front desk.
Yeah.
That is the inciting incident. That is what leads to a unraveling of obsession from Rupert that leads him to stalk this man and put him into a state of discomfort, leading to Rupert inevitably winding up getting his 15 minutes of fame, which leads to one of the most interesting and satisfying endings they could have possibly written for this.
But also one that leaves questions, like with the end of Joker.
It's very much ambiguous.
It's ambiguous. So at the end of the King of Comedy, of course, Rupert ends up going to jail. He's supposed to go for 6 years, but people were so enamored with him and what lengths he went to get on TV that he's out in 2.5 years, I think.
2.5 years. 2 years, 6. Yeah, it was like 2 years, 7 months or something.
Yeah.
I can't remember, but the specifics on that. But he gets out early.
And he's written a book and he's got his own show now. But you don't really know if it was fiction or not.
Well, because there's a way that final sequence is shot on his show, his new reformed show out of prison, where it feels almost like a dream. It doesn't feel quite right. And so it's left up to your interpretation of whether or not it's real or not. And I think that's the perfect way to end this movie because it's drenched in delusion.
It was. And I mean, again, it ends much in the same way that I perceived Joker to end.
That's right. It's a fantasy. Yeah. And it's a fantasy of a very broken person who has some very serious delusions on their life. And also it's a tragedy in a way too.
It is. I mean, a part of me did feel bad for Rupert. A
bigger
bigger part of me felt bad for Jerry.
I felt bad for Jerry. Because I love the performance because he's just got this look of disdain and just discomfort and annoyance throughout the entire thing. And he just doesn't even have words to even speak to this guy because he's just like, what the hell do I do? Like, get this guy out of my house. And like, oh my God, I loved it.
It was really good.
It's a lot of fun.
I enjoyed it a lot. Yeah, it was fun.
It was great to finally get a chance to sit down with this one because I've heard a lot of good things about it, and it was a total pleasure to kind of see this and juxtapose it narratively against Joker, which is a bit more of a heavier subject matter to dive into. Mm-hmm. But that being said, this is still really interesting and engaging and still holds up. It's an 80s time capsule. Both are technically. Yeah. When you think about it. Because
kind of.
The Joker's very much set in the 80s.
Yeah, just shot in 2000s.
Yeah, so.
I mean, and this one is set in the 80s and shot in the 80s. And I mean, the performances in this too were really, really good.
Yeah.
Like De Niro knocked it out of the park, but I'm not surprised there. He is a very talented man.
This is in his heyday, and like this is a great character performance.
Yeah.
And it's very off kilter with a lot of content that he had done up until this point. Geez, like line this right up with Taxi Driver, and you couldn't play a more different character, right? Travis Bickle in Taxi Driver is upsetting and scary because he conforms into society so well. Like he blends into society well. He could be just a guy you walk past on the street. That's what's scary about Travis Bickle. And the audience is voyeuristically looking into his life and realizing very quickly that he's a very broken person. This character, Rupert, you feel bad for him. You're annoyed by him, but it's a totally different character portrayal because he's approaching a very similar sort of mentally unstable person from a different angle. Like it's totally different. It's different repressed feelings that he's unpacking here.
Yeah. I mean, really, everybody in this was top notch.
Oh yeah, stellar. And it has a bit of a satirical edge to it. It is actually pretty funny at points in the most uncomfortable way imaginable.
Oh God, be prepared to squirm. If you have a problem with secondhand discomfort,
oh yeah, tons of that.
You're don't want to sit next to somebody watching this, I guess.
I highly recommend for the most effective watch, maybe watch this with a group or with someone else. I don't know if it's definitely something that you'll get some entertainment value at regardless of the setting, but I do feel like get someone with you that hasn't seen it before and dive right in and just kind of like let it take you on a ride because it is a lot of fun.
It is. It's pretty entertaining.
And it's thoughtful and it's thought-provoking and interesting and engaging. It's good stuff. It's well directed. I mean, that goes without saying. It's Scorsese, so.
Although he does have some interesting opinions on superhero movies.
Oh, goodness, yes. I mean, it's an elephant in the room. We'll kind of end our review on this with this little report because Scorsese obviously released recently that his opinions on superhero movies, which is an interesting angle to sort of compare and contrast The King of Comedy, which is now a classic, with the more recently released Joker, which is being heralded as a modern classic in the genre of superhero films, that he has gone on record saying that superhero movies are like theme park rides, and his distaste for them subsequently being revealed. And I mean, to be fair, like, I don't think either of us have any jurisdiction on telling Martin Scorsese that he's wrong. The man,
and I mean, at the end of the day, it's an opinion.
Totally.
Right?
And like, I think
my parents are tired of superhero movies too.
I slowly get tired of them. I'm a little exhausted by them too. And like, I don't think that there's an inherent lack of inaccuracy in what he's saying, because some, if not a large portion of the superhero genre, does feel like a theme park ride, in that it is very much an experience that you go to with a bunch of people, and it's fleeting and you forget it in T-minus like 2 days. Like, some of them stick with you, and some of them are actually having some engaging things to say, which is why I think it's important that we drew some comparisons between Joker and this movie, is because some superhero movies within the genre, and just like any genre of cinema, is going to have some thoughtful, very well directed, very well constructed film, like engaging film.
I mean, Joker's not a superhero movie, but
No,
but yeah,
it's still lumped into the genre.
Yeah, it's a comic book villain.
Yeah, it's an adaptation from a graphic novel. So I guess in that regard, like, we just kind of wanted to speak a little bit to the opinions of Scorsese, and like, not to necessarily state that he's, right or wrong. We're not like that as people. No. Like, if anything, I kind of understand where he's coming from.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because when you think about it, it's hard to imagine this, but like, when Jaws came out in the 70s, like,
isn't that the best shark movie?
I consider it to be the best shark movie. I'm glad we got that on record. So that being said, when Jaws was released in the 70s, it was very much stated by critics as being the death of cinema, because that was the birth of the blockbuster. So there's always going to be periods of time where whatever is the status quo, popular pop culture explosion in film, that is going to rub some people the wrong way that grew up from a different era, or that are more inspired by other things. And if you get wrapped up into the zeitgeist of the superhero films, a lot of them do follow a very distinct formula. They're very much just an entertainment driven component that they have narratives and they have plots, but inevitably they can feel like a hollow experience. Not all of them, obviously. I love the superhero movies. I think that they're a lot of fun. I do think that I'm getting a little tired of them. There's too many of them per year, but I haven't complained about seeing too many of them. So I don't know. I fall very much in the middle on this. What about you, Hallie?
I'm ready for a Spawn movie.
Okay.
I am kind of done with superheroes for the time being. I'm going to put them in a box and put them to the side. I want Spawn. I have so many Spawn comics, it's not even funny. And I'm waiting for the remake. I don't like talking about the one they did in the 90s, but I will.
You mean you're looking for... Oh, so the one that's with Jamie Foxx that's coming out? Yeah. That could be fun. Yeah, that could be fun. I don't know.
Give me the anti-heroes.
So that's your unpacking from the Scorsese comments? You want a Spawn movie?
I want a Spawn movie. Honestly, I don't think it had anything to do with it. I just want a Spawn movie.
I'm glad you got that.
But we should talk about scores.
Yeah, let's get to the scores on The King of Comedy.
I went first last time. You're up first.
Oh, that's right. It's me. Okay. I thought The King of Comedy was a excellently directed, engaging, albeit cringeworthy, borderline unwatchable movie in a lot of ways, just because through the whole thing I was squirming. And I mean, I know that that's what the movie's intent is. That's what it's trying to do. I don't think I'll watch it again. I did enjoy it though, and I was entertained, and it's undeniably well. Yeah, it's worth a rent. It's well made. I'm gonna go with a 7.5 for The King of Comedy.
Right on.
Your turn.
I enjoyed the movie from what I saw of it. I was squirming quite a bit with the oh god, what? No, call secure. Why? Oh god. So it was really good though. The acting in it was great. I liked the way that they cut between fantasy and reality. I thought that was a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. Overall, fun movie. I enjoyed it. I gave it an 8.
Nice. Cool. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, that kind of wraps things up.
That wraps it up for this episode of Silver Screen Anomalies. As always, you can follow us on Instagram, eldritch.creative. You can join our Facebook page. Let us know if there are any movies you'd like us to look at. Then we also have Twitter, Eldritch Create. And I guess that's it for now.
That's it, folks.
Yeah.
That's all she wrote.
Don't forget to check out our short film is out on YouTube now. Eldritch Creative is the channel. The name of the short is Guardian. Subscribe. We do have some interesting content in the works. Just ironing out some details.
For all you horror fans, we may or may not have a Halloween-themed episode in
coming
the works.
up.
Yeah. Plus, it'll be our year anniversary.
Yeah, that's right. 1 year anniversary of Eldritch Creative. So that's all pretty exciting stuff. So yeah, thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.